Welcome to Conscious Marketing Movement podcast, where we bring you thought-provoking conversations to challenge traditional marketing practices and inspire a new paradigm, shaping the future of marketing for a better tomorrow. In our first season, we'll explore how can marketing drive climate action. We'll be talking with sustainability communicators, brand strategists, designers, all sharing their knowledge and first-hand experiences. So whether you're listening to us at home with your favorite beverage or on your daily commute, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the episode.
In this episode, we are joined by Suzie Mills, the ambassador of Clean Creatives, which is a global movement of PR professionals and advertisers joining forces to cut ties with fossil fuels. Also, she is a founder of a mission-driven sustainable design and strategic communications agency, Oxygen Communications. Today we're going to go into Suzie's journey, how she left a big advertising corporate world and created her own agency, and also going to learn more about Clean Creatives' mission. So if you're a marketer or communications professional who's interested in making your work more environmentally friendly and would like to learn how to build a supportive work culture, then this episode is for you. Hello, Suzie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We here in Conscious Marketing Movement have been supportive and have signed the pledge of Clean Creatives.
Great.
And thank you so much for this chance to have this time together to learn more about the work, what do ambassadors do,
Sure.
and how can marketers get involved. And of course, learn more about your personal journey. So to start with, I'd like to take us right at the beginning, because you had quite a varied career path. Working for these big corporate, I don't know if they're corporate, but like big advertising agencies.
Big agencies, yeah, exactly.
And then creating your own agency. Can you take us back to the moment when you knew you wanted to make that leap?
So I'm not sure there was one lightning moment, but there was definitely a series of events that led me to not want to work for these big corporate giants, like you say, and to just have a bit more meaning in what I was doing with my career, especially given the climate crisis and the sort of state of the world. So to take back to where I started from, which was almost 20 years ago now, which is but started as an account manager at EHS brand, working on the likes of Barclays and Barclays Wealth, which was great. You know, it was a real throw me into the world of sort of advertising and account management, and I loved it. It was super fast paced, learnt loads, and really enjoyed it. Moved on from there to working for Vodafone for Digital and Direct. Okay. So again, another big corporate sort of giant, and again learnt lots. But it was I remember working EHS on I think it was a pitch or a campaign for a child obesity campaign, which was one of the few sort of charities that the agency had at the time. Most of them were like Tesco's, Barclays, etc. And I remember thinking at the time, God, this tone of voice and the worth of working on something like this was so much more rewarding than creating another sort of pack for a Barclays Wealth direct mailer sort of thing. But I didn't do anything about that at the time, but it definitely stuck with me. And then I think as I sort of got a bit older, moved on to working for Nissan at Digitas LBI, which again, another big corporate sort of selling cars, obviously. And I think at the same time I started to have kids, so I had my first child, and it was that sort of moment, and moved out of London to Oxford. And it was that sort of moment of being like, God, I would quite like to do something a bit more meaningful here. And, bring your children into the world and be doing something that's a bit more sort of, especially, like I say, with the climate crisis. So there wasn't one moment, but it was a gradual realisation that, and also that, creative is such a force for good. And that is something I'll probably say about 10 times during this interview. And so, I really wanted to be a part of that movement that's using it for good. There were several moments along the way.
This is so interesting because you're not the first guest who's a woman that says that the shift started with having children, which I think is very natural.
Yeah, definitely. We've got organisations we work with who have been founded because their owner or their founder has had kids and realised that, I don't want this kid to grow up in this world like it's in. I want to be doing something to help protect their future in whatever small way that might be.
Yeah.
So I think it is. I think particularly for women, it's a very sort of pivotal moment that in many ways.
Yeah, it's. I would love to also touch on gender question, because when we connected the first time, you did mention that that your kind of previous life was very kind of male dominated and very fast paced and I assume very profit driven. Can you maybe talk more about that working environment? And in no way I want to picture like, oh, you know, they're the baddies and we're the good ones, but what were the differences in working culture?
Yeah, I mean, just huge. And like I haven't been in the world of advertising, that agency side now for sort of, 10 years or so, but then it was, like I mentioned before, it was sort of, fast-paced, loads of fun. I will reiterate that. I really enjoyed it because I was in my, mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
And you could do be in the office by 8 a.m, never leaving before 6, if ever. If you're working on a pitch, you're there till 1 a.m. and then back in again at 7, 8 a.m. And that was regular if you're working on pitches. And, that lifestyle is just not sustainable. Having said that, I did learn a lot. I learned loads in terms of, managing clients, difficult clients, all of which translates now to the work we do at Oxygen in terms of, that my client management skills. So it made me super driven. It made me very determined. So there's lots of positives to take out of it. It was just very fast paced. And I think in terms of the sort of male dominated, I really felt that. Perhaps not unsurprisingly, when I started working on the Nissan account. And not necessarily actually with the client, but all the heads of agencies were all male. And I was one of the only female leaders in a team at that time. And, and I was fairly new to that level of seniority. I was new to the automotive industry. And you'd go into this room, I'll never forget it, of like 20 sort of men around here with one client. And you'd had to sometimes literally shout to be heard.
Oh, gosh.
Because, the agencies, they're all there for their different remits. But everyone's also trying to increase their slice of the pie and show themselves to their client as being the most knowledgeable, the most connected or the most fun. And it was a really toxic environment. And it really dented my confidence. And until I figured out how to kind of rebuild that confidence and navigate that landscape effectively. So yeah, it was looking back at it, it was a really tough time and definitely was part of the reason that I left the agency world. But and then in terms of profit driven, I think the culture it creates, just with ridiculously tight budgets, unrealistic expectations of timelines, that all, and the pressure to kind of, you've got to hit these targets and these sales, and that it'd be unrealistic to say that we don't have those in the mission-driven world, but it's not like, that culture isn't like that in terms of the toxicity and, the lack of respect, I think, I really felt, which since moving, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a sec, since moving from there to Oxford HR and now running Oxygen, you just don't get that. It was a learning curve and a really tricky couple of years.
Gosh, it sounds like it.
But it was fun. There was fun times too.
I suppose you built a very strong resilience,
resilience
in this
is
environment
the word.
and
Definitely.
try not to take things personally. But it does feel very much like this animalistic world of like, I need to shout and be loud and very...
And it feels a bit archaic now, to be honest. It really does feel outdated. And like I say, it may well be because I haven't been there for 10 years, but I suspect not. In the big agencies now still, I'd imagine that would be quite a similar experience. Yeah, it just felt outdated and sort of, not a way to get the best out of people either.
No. I experienced similar in advocacy work in Lithuania when we had to advocate and go into meetings with male-dominated, let's say, groups and also slightly older. And if you're a young female, then to have your voice heard is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
No matter how smart you are, how many degrees you got, but just because you're a woman and you look in a certain way, you're not taken maybe as seriously as someone else.
Exactly, yeah, totally.
But here we are. We're not in that world anymore. And so now moving into Oxford HR. Can you tell us more about that shift and change and what was the working culture there?
Yeah, well, it's a really good segue, in fact, from what I've just been talking about to the exact opposite. I mean, it was quite life-changing, really, for me, and definitely has formed how, I run Oxygen and how I want people to enjoy being there. Because when I started at Oxford HR, my brother-in-law had worked there for years, so he introduced me to the CEO, David Lale, who's now also my business partner with Oxygen. And he needed a communications director. They'd never had one officially before, despite having been around for 25 years. And so they're a global leadership company. So they support leaders in mission-driven organisations around the world. So while still profit-driven, they're working only with charities and NGOs. So it was definitely much more a step in the right direction of where I wanted to be in terms of doing something more rewarding. But yeah, my youngest was only 12 weeks old when this interview came up. And it was one of those opportunities that you just think, if I don't grab it now, then it won't, someone else will take it. But what that meant was I worked from home. I did 1 day a week, spread out however I wanted to. And I just initially started with doing them a sort of communications plan and sort of content plan and just bringing their communications more to the fore. That then built up over the course of the next year to be a sort of, full-time job. But I had complete autonomy. I had complete trust. I had complete respect. I had complete support, despite the fact I had basically a newborn. And I absolutely loved it. And it took me a while to get used to it, to be honest. I was a bit like, really?
Can I trust this?
Is this real? And it was only at the time sort of 12 strong person organisation, now sort of 100 plus. So we were a very tight knit group, and I think it was just the difference in respect and their support was just a different world. And it made a huge difference, as you might imagine, to my sort of personal life, my personal emotions. And I absolutely loved it. Still did. And so, I was working there until December last year because Oxygen was a spin-off of Oxford HR as a design team. And then we went independent as of January this year. I was there sort of 6 years, and it was it's a brilliant job. The culture is grown up to saying before that the agencies felt archaic. This felt like the right way to treat people, and everyone gave and gives their all there because they love the people and they love what they're doing.
And how did you feel that impacted your personal motivation and creativity?
Yeah, hugely, I think. It's sort of, that desire to want to do good because you're being respected, or that you've got the freedom to come up with ideas and no one's going to say, well, that's a stupid idea. Yeah, why not give it a try and see if it works or not? That just gives you such a sense of purpose is something that with Oxygen, I always encourage of my team, any ideas for partnerships or events or, ideas for something we want to do, bring them to the table, let's discuss them, as long as they're in line with our values and vague sort of strategic, direction, then it's worth discussing. I think it unleashes so much more creativity.
Yes, I agree. And so much confidence as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And autonomy, like, I can do this.
Yeah, and especially if you've got a young team as well. It's super, super formative as to how your career goes if you're allowed that, if you've got that support at the beginning, I think.
So I hope your story is going to be a huge inspiration for people who are either in the corporate world right now and want to make a leap, or someone who's kind of still looking for their path in marketing world. There are amazing working environments out there. We just need to kind of look for them, I guess.
Climate Hope has a sound, and it's your voice. Are you a female entrepreneur working in climate action, dreaming of starting your own podcast? Join Voices for Climate Action, a podcast training program by and for women entrepreneurs in climate action across the EU. You'll get 4 days of hands-on in-person training at the location of your choice, whether that's sunny Greece, the river valleys of Austria, or online from wherever you are. Apply now and learn how to tell stories that inspire ideas, laughs, tears, and real change. Applications are open until 5th of May 2025.
So now I'd like to move into Clean Creatives. How did you hear about them? Why did you join them? And maybe you can present more their mission overall.
Yeah, certainly. So I think it was actually my account manager, Ruth Davis, who found them, but Clean Creatives, that is. But I think it's when we were setting up Oxygen to go independent middle of last year, and we wanted to align ourselves with organisations and campaigns that were doing good things. Our sort of mission is to elevate brands that are doing good. And Clean Creatives was a bit of a no-brainer in terms of their mission to encourage and support PR and advertising agencies to cut ties with fossil fuel companies. So because Oxygen's mission has only ever been to work with mission-driven organisations, it wasn't that we were ever intentionally going to work with fossil fuel, but we might, for example, have considered working with the Shell Foundation, for example. But then once we got more into sort of Duncan and Laura, who are sort of behind Clean Creatives, more into the detail of the greenwashing and the reneging on pledges and that these fossil fuel companies do. Then we were like, right, actually, there is something here to be really quite active about in terms of, PR and also just the strength that PR and advertising agencies have. And, why use that to support fossil fuel companies, which we know are actively and currently and intentionally harming the environment, given that we're right in the middle of a climate crisis. Yeah. So as a values-aligned organisation, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So that was signing the pledge, which obviously I'm glad to hear you guys have done as well. Yeah. And I encourage everyone to do so. But then the ambassador piece came along with, again, Laura and Duncan wanting to have a sort of smaller group of agencies and sort of agency heads who more actively promote. So we've run a couple of events supporting campaigns that Clean Creatives are doing, and just sort of to fuel that conversation. If we're at an event, for example, we would also be not just promoting brand awareness for our work, but also Clean Creatives as well. Mm-hmm. And my whole team will do that. It's a brilliant organisation to be aligned with, and their campaigns are super powerful. It feels right to be doing it, to be honest.
It really does. And I guess what I would find sometimes difficult, because there are these companies or big brand groups. So sometimes if there is a brand, let's say Garnier, and you think they might be kind of okay-ish, but then you look at what they actually, like what's the bigger group that they belong to. So Clean Creatives, do they offer some sort of resources where you can, if you're not sure about the client, like do I work with them or not, are there any resources that people can go and check?
Yeah, they've got, on their website, they've got lots of resources, and there's sort of there's the bad list, which is all the agencies and who they're working with. So you can, there's lots of resources you can access to look at that. And they're also extremely approachable as an organisation to sort of be like, heard about this client or was wondering about it, and they'll be able to sort of look up information for you on that. So they're very approachable to work with like that. And also in terms of campaigns you might want to run or ideas you might have, they're very supportive in terms of that.
Just to be a little bit of a kind of devil's advocate, and I would like to explore with you, because we can say no to fossil fuels, and we should say, and I've campaigned for years with my climate activism against fossil fuels, so I'm completely with you. But just for the sake of exploration, if we are, let's say, quite a powerful advertising or PR agency, and we are building the awareness how to do the communications in the right way without greenwashing, is there some sort of benefit if we work with those maybe more polluting companies to educate them and act as an educator and kind of help them out somehow? Or do you think it's a complete no and it's better not get involved?
I mean, I do. It was actually the question that I had when I first with Clean Creatives was that surely if you can create more change from within. But I just don't think you can with fossil fuel companies. I think if you're in there, then you're still supporting them and you're still taking their money and you're still doing work for them and creating work for them. And so I think, honestly, that actually cutting all ties is probably the strongest way to show that, this isn't acceptable. And like I say, I think there's so much sort of greenwashing that has gone on as well. Back in the 70s, these ad agencies knew what they were doing, and they knew what the harm was. Yeah. And yet, still had all these big campaigns. And to answer your question, I think you need to just cut ties with them. If they can't, if they can't produce their ads, if they can't produce their campaigns, if they have no vessel to do that, the move to a cleaner energy, I think, will be that much easier.
And they had their chance. They had their years chance. And decades to be on the right side of the history, and they chose not to, and they're still doing it and still digging the oil and ruining the communities. And so I think you're right, just cutting ties with these companies. And I guess for us as creatives, taking that responsibility that although maybe we don't want to be associated with these advertising companies that have collaborated with fossil fuels and have run big greenwashing campaigns, but we as a whole, as an industry, we do have a very big role to play here. So what's your kind of outlook and maybe story around that as advertisers? How do we shift from someone who's been maybe polluting and harming the world to making a change, to being a change maker? as a marketer?
I think it sort of comes down again to that using creative as a force for good. If you listen to the statistics, for example, that fossil fuel pollution prematurely kills around 8.7 million people globally per year. If you hear that stat and then you sit down to write an ad for Shell. Yeah. I mean, your moral compass has got to be slightly off. There's just so much potential with creatives that we can do. And in terms of sort of seeking out mission-driven organisations to work with, for example, the B Corp movement is only growing. I mean, especially in the UK, but more globally as well now. These are organisations that they have a framework to work with them. They are constantly trying to do good and are striving to do better in how they do things. So as a creative, I do find it harder and harder to sort of wonder why you would choose to work for a fossil fuel organisation than when there is now more option. And certainly before, their money would have been a reason. The bigger agencies pay bigger, clearly. Someone like Shell has a load of money to be able to pay their agencies. I think that balance has shifted now, and I think you don't have to leave the corporate world and come into working for a mission-driven organisation, and it means that you halve your wages. It's easier to make that choice, and I think, again, given the climate crisis, morally, I think, and get for your work satisfaction of what you do, I think it's more and more appealing. As we go down this route of the climate crisis, I think for advertisers' careers to continue to stick with supporting fossil fuel companies, I think actually it doesn't look great on your career going forward either, when there are other choices now. That's something to factor in, I think.
I think you're right. I think we are now living at the time, definitely a very challenging time in so many different ways, but there are more and more companies working towards solutions. Yeah. And just looking at climate industry, you can go in so many different directions. You can work for food innovation, agriculture, go into tech, into clean energy. There's just so many opportunities.
There really are, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of, at least how I make my own choices as a marketer. I really feel like, what is the kind of driving force personally? What do I feel connected with? What kind of industry I really want to support? And then what skills I've got. Then you kind of join those two and make it work.
Yeah, definitely.
So for any marketers out there who want to learn more about clean creatives, what would you advise? What can they do? Where can they go?
So the best place to start is the Clean Creatives website. They also, if you actively look at who their ambassadors are, such as ourselves, like I say, we run events. We will be in especially in the UK, but globally, places you can attend to learn more. Things like this that would be great to learn more about. But I think reaching out and finding out more. Any one of us ambassadors, if we're locally, we'll always meet to talk about things. And I think, there is a wealth of information on the website in terms of why you should get involved. It's a very personal organisation to support. So that'd be the first place to start.
A big part of it is the community, right? Because once you join a certain movement, you meet people who think like you, who are kind of similar like you, and then there's also a very good kind of career opportunity to meet other professionals, learn from them, and build that community. I certainly feel that with conscious marketing movement. That's one of the biggest aspects why I'm here.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, it's funny, since we started Oxygen, I've been quite surprised that agencies that potentially could be competitors, but actually how they pull together. And Clean Creatives is an example of that. When we've run events, that we've had a few agencies in the room who they probably are vying for the same work, but the sentiment is there's plenty to go around. What we're doing is for a bigger picture here, and that, again, to hark back to the corporate world, that is just so different. It's so different, and really refreshing. But it did surprise me to begin with, and it's so in a good way, obviously. But that community feel, not just with Clean Creatives, but there's a load of there's the Better Business Act, there's B Corp, like I mentioned earlier, and that really does feel like a movement and a community, and like everyone can figure out their own piece to play in that. Which is refreshing.
It's so refreshing
and more powerful.
Exactly. I feel especially with competition, there's this difference maybe in mindsets, that at least the way I operate, that we live in an abundant world. If you're an agency, especially if you're working online, a lot of our services are digital. There's plenty of clients out there, and also, of course, depending where you live. But for me, as someone who works in several languages, then it's also another reminder to be like, the world is abundant, and we don't need to compete for same clients. There's enough work for everyone, and we are unique. And the way I do maybe comms strategy is going to be very different than the way you do it, and people are always going to choose who they vibe with. I keep reminding myself also that there's enough work for everyone out there, and at the end of the day, the mission for us as marketers is bigger than anything. It's bigger than ourselves, bigger than our careers.
Yeah, there was a phrase that every job had become a climate job. They have different specialisms that work across, humanitarian and et cetera, but more and more, every job has a climate impact, and it's the same. So, I think bearing that in mind, pulling together and sort of finding our niches and working together it's just that much more powerful. Again, it feels that bit more sort of grown up,
Grown up, I know.
Not to go back to that again, but it does.
Yeah, it's putting kind of personal things aside as well. We were joking with the founder, Claudia, of the Conscious Marketing Movement, that sometimes founders, they need to go to therapy and work on your own personal things, because at the end of the day, we know why we're joining forces, and we just need to do that personal work also along the way to achieve that goal. Thank you so much, Suzie. That's been great.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The last question I have for you, just a personal one.
Yeah.
What keeps you going?
Two things. So one is genuinely getting up and working with Oxygen every day. I mean, genuinely, my team are amazing. And we've just started our journey. The fact that we are supporting our clients with their, have impact, and the fact that we are supporting them in their mission and their values is so important to me, and I don't think that will ever get old. It's just no 2 days are the same, literally. Quite surprisingly so, actually. and I think that's never going to get old for me. I love what we're doing and how we're having, however small an impact, we are having a positive impact, and and that will never get old. And then the other one, to come back to my kids again, is my I've got 3 kids and they're all little eco warriors. All of them. Yeah, and but inherently, and they'll go out litter picking of their own accord, and they'll raise money for sort of various environmental things through school. And for me to be able to sort of be proud about what I do, and to be able to say, I'm contributing to help your environment for the future, that again will never get old, and definitely gets me out of bed in the mornings.
That's so inspiring. I want to have children. They're little eco warriors.
Honestly, it's amazing. Their schools so engenders it in them now. It's not an option to not be one, and I think that's amazing. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Education, huge piece of puzzle.
Huge. Yeah, huge.
Well, that's probably for another podcast.
Yes. Part 2.
Part 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck with Oxygen, and best of luck with Clean Creatives.
Yeah.
And I encourage everyone to go and find Clean Creatives, sign their pledge, and join their community. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you would like to learn more about what is conscious marketing and join the community of entrepreneurs and change makers marketers, head to consciousmarketingmovement.com and join the membership.